It is the start of week 2 in former President Trump's hush money trial. He has been charged with 34 counts criminally for falsifying documents as it pertains to Stormy Daniels, the adult film star actress. In court today, before they even get to the meat of the trial and while they're there, the judge has had to address the gag order and has fined former President Trump now $1,000 for 9 violations of the gag order. Joining me now, trial attorney and legal analyst Wendy Patrick. Wendy, it is a small drop in the bucket financially for Trump to pay these fines. Does it deter him from continuing to speak about the case on social media, as he has been told now by the judge not to do and fined?
I believe it's going to, Marnie. I know that I've heard a lot of naysayers think there's no way to rein him in, but Donald Trump doesn't want to go to jail and doesn't want any kind of confinement. Remember, it would be complicated because he has a Secret Service and there'd be a lot of arrangements that would have to be made. But you'll notice, and at least I've noticed as I followed with great interest what he says in and out of the courtroom, that he really has tried to tailor his remarks, at least in the last couple of days, more towards who he is allowed to talk about. Remember, he is allowed to talk about the judge, just not the family members of the judge. He can talk about the proceedings being unfair. He's being fined for going into the areas that Judge Marchant warned him he couldn't. The witnesses, prospective jurors, jurors that have already been seated. So now that we actually have this ruling, the real challenge Donald Trump is going to face is the fact that Michael Cohen is coming up. He is going to be on the docket, no doubt sooner rather than later, given the foundation that these witnesses laid last week and this week. So he's going to have to watch his tongue. His lawyers are going to do the best they can to at least now explain that the judge put on the record that if he continues to willfully violate the order, incarceration is a possibility.
And talking about the foundation being laid, what do you make of the legal arguments so far that this jury has heard in the case with 3 witnesses?
Well, last week we took a walk down memory lane when we learned again. Remember, we talked about The Apprentice and the National Enquirer, that many of us remember back in the days when we actually used to stand in a grocery checkout line before self-checkout. But what that did is lay the foundation for what you're hearing today. Now we're getting into the money and we're getting into the Stormy Daniels. And, you know, it's a way to lay a foundation that was interesting. David Pecker was on the stand for a long time, but now it's getting to be to the point where the jurors are reportedly actively taking notes. So they have seen the segue that we're laying a foundation for what's coming next, which is the gist of the trial, the campaign donations, what they're alleging they really were, the payments to Stormy Daniels.
And has the defense been successful in trying to poke holes in that story the prosecution is trying to tell?
Well, to some extent. And I know the answer to that, Maury, sometimes seems to be it depends on who you talk to. At the very least, they were able to describe a little more that hush money payments are not unusual. They happen in a lot of different cases. The prosecution, however, was at least able to bring it back to the reality of this case and what they were allegedly mischaracterized at in this case. That's what's going to distinguish this week from last week, which was a more general recitation of how these payments are made, the role that David Pecker played with his relationship with Donald Trump and in other cases as well. So I think what we're really setting the stage for is Michael Cohen's testimony, which I know the president is going to have to really try to hold it together, but that's going to be the gist of what we're working up to this week.
Yeah, a true test of patience. We also saw, as Trump headed into court this morning, in the background was his son, Eric Trump. To our knowledge, this is the first time a family member has accompanied the former president to this trial. What do you make of that as week 2 begins?
A showing of support. You know, it's one thing to say, well, obviously a candidate's wife wouldn't want to be in a courtroom where the hush money payments to a porn star are being discussed. Nobody can argue with that. But his family's always been very supportive. Obviously, the interesting thing, Marnie, about your question is Eric Trump is not evidence yet. Will the jury, albeit improperly, consider the other family members in the courtroom in rendering their decision? They can't do that. It's sort of like when Bill Cosby's wife showed up in court. The jurors weren't allowed to consider that as well because she wasn't evidence. But it does show solidarity, and that may be one of the reasons you may begin to see other family members in court. If they're not ready to be witnesses, they're allowed to be there.
Right, and another potential witness could be the former president himself. Wendy, as always, thank you.
Thank you, Marnie.
All right, we're also monitoring another situation